Good morning, everyone. I'm back once again with the distinctive features of language of literature, and this is the last segment of our discussion. Though it is very vast topic, and there can be an unlimited discussion on it, but still somewhere we have to draw a line, and this is just an introductory thing to get you all into the features of language of literature, so that when we are attempting critical analysis or critical appreciation of a poem, or when we are writing reference to context, we can just pinpoint those features which we can identify in any literary piece, especially in a poetic piece. Now let me start where we stopped yesterday. We had discussed about in our previous discussions on deviations, foregrounding, rhyme, rhythm, verse, etc. Now I begin with other figures of speech which are used by poets in the language of literature. The use of a variety of figures of speech is another significant distinctive feature of literary language. There is a plain and obvious way of saying a thing, a bare, unadorned statement of fact that has the merit of clearness, just as it was in all day. Then there was a phrase from morn till eve, and then there was the third phrase which I have previously discussed with you. So that is the difference, where the first one is very clear, the second one is a slightly literary, and the third phrase was purely a literary expression. So, a bare, unadorned statement of fact that has the merit of clearness, but otherwise has no claim upon our attention. For example, we may say life is short, or I have read many books. They are the common property of mankind. When, however, Marvell says that, but at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us like deserts of vast eternity. Or when Keats says, much have I travelled in the realms of gold, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen. Round many western islands have I been, which bards in fealty to Apollo hold. So, the clear, candid way of saying about the shortness of life is short. But when Marvell says that at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, Marvell is also reminding us of the transitoriness of life in this world. But the first one, life is short, is very clear and candid, ordinary statement. It is a statement of fact about the transitoriness of life, whereas the Marvell's lines are a piece of literary expression, or the literary language, poetic language, where we have different figures of speech employed by the poet in order to convey the thought, or convey the idea of transitoriness of life, or mortality of human life in this world, on this earth. We feel that two commonplace remarks have been transformed into something beautiful, individual, and immortal. No literary artist is satisfied with bare statement of facts. He does his thoughts the honor of wishing to clothe them fittingly. He desires to please his readers by presenting them with a beautiful word picture. Far from being a matter of superficial ornament, this desire arises from deep feeling. So instead of uttering obvious statement, life is short, the poet says, as for man his days are as grass, as a flower of field, so he flourisheth. For the wind passeth over it, and it is gone, and the place thereof shall know it no more. The desire to present a truth in this way gives rise to all the varieties of tropes of figure of speech that abound in our literature, and the discovery of likeness more or less suitable gives us those particular figures known as similes. The most effective similes, generally speaking, are those where a casual glance shows a resemblance, but where a close inspection reveals that in the respect of specified, the two dissimilar things are alike. For example, in Keats's lines, the clouds were pure and white as flocks new shorn, and fresh from the clear brook. The words pure and white provide the clue. A good simile takes away the reader's breath just for a moment, as in this example. I saw eternity the other night, like a great ring of pure endless right. I saw eternity the other night, like a great ring of pure and endless right. This quotation is, these lines are from Henry Vaughan's poetry. A well-worn and obvious simile loses the power of surprise and so the literary value, as when we say, the brothers are as like as two peas. On the other hand, the likeness must not be so subtle as to hold the reader up indefinitely. A balance has to be struck between the obvious and the far-fetched. The figure becomes more striking when the writer boldly abandons any attempt to explain himself and, full of confidence in the truth of his likeness, leaves the reader to unravel the mystery for himself or herself. For example, one declares, man is a bubble. The maker of this metaphor, thinking of man's frailty, asks us to what he shall liken him. And finding his answer most effectively in a bubble, he boldly disregards the many differences between the two, the bubble and man's life, risks the possibility of misconception and proclaims that these two are one. Metaphor is as effective as it is hazardous. The writer stakes everything upon a single throw, but the results of that throw, when the hand is skilled, constitutes one of the chief glories of literature. John Masefield asserts grimly enough that life is a long headache in a noisy street. The effective metaphors, like the effective similes, makes the readers gasp a little with surprise. We sigh, we gasp a little. What the writer is trying to connect in these two far-fetched things, distant things which are brought together in a metaphor. When it ceases to astonish, it ceases to have life. Like metaphor, personification also plays a very important part in literary language or in the expression of literary writings. It can be really successful, however, only when it arises quite naturally from a spirit which is akin to that of those former days when personification was a reality and not a pose. The employment of allegory is another distinctive feature of literary language. Moreover, there are many words that give something to the required idea. A name by its beauty of sound and wealth of association may also lend luster and distinction to literary language. Thus, figures are valued most of all because they open our eyes to unsuspected glories. Onomatopoeia is another figure of speech which functions at phonological level to create the effect of the sound that has been used in the poem through the words that are used by the poet. So the words create the effect of the sound. For example, buzz. The z the Z sound creates the effect of buzzing. So the figures are valued most of all because they open our eyes to unexpected glories, unsuspected glories. They help us to see correspondences of which we should have never dreamed and lead us naturally to a conception of the tidy unity underlying all outward differences. Very neat and clean unity is there. Tidy unity is there. Thus we have seen how far the language can go in producing literary effects. Wordsworth says, "The charm of words in fineful order, sweet for their own sakes." In fact, English language is marvelously rich in apparatus for expressing fine shades of thoughts through the medium of various such devices. In literature, what we have is language and not concrete situations. It is from the language used in the text that we make inference about the implied context or situation, action, character, etc. So to sum up, we can say, in the words of G.N. Leach, once again I am quoting, "The literature cannot be examined in any depth apart from the language, any more than the language can be studied apart from the literature." Thank you so much.